All right, history enthusiasts, welcome back. And a special shout out to those of you prepping for UPSC exams, especially that GS1 Modern History section. Building on our last deep dive into this era, if you're new here, definitely catch up on that one later. Today, we're tackling a name I'm sure you've all heard of, Sarojini Naidu, the Nightingale of India, right?
Yes, a title she's very well known for.
But she was so much more than just her poetry, which is amazing in itself.
Absolutely. Her life was incredibly impactful beyond just the literary world.
We're going to uncover that freedom fighter, that women's rights advocate, the global diplomat she was. Get ready for some surprises along the way.
I think a lot of people will be surprised by how much she accomplished beyond the well-known image.
So where do we even begin with a life this multifaceted? Let's rewind back to her early days.
Sounds good. Early influences are always fascinating to explore.
Born in 1879, Naidu was pretty young when she jumped into the Indian national movement.
Right. The 1905 Bengal partition really galvanized a lot of people, and she was no exception.
And here comes a twist you might not expect. She was awarded the Kaiser-Hind Medal by the British government.
Oh, yeah, that's a fascinating detail. It really highlights the complicated relationship between the British Raj and prominent Indians at that time.
She was actively opposing their rule, but still got this award. Seems contradictory, doesn't it?
It was a strategy they used, awarding prominent Indians even if they had nationalist leanings.
A way to keep some control, perhaps. Make it look like collaboration.
Exactly. Pacify the movement from within, maybe even create divisions.
Wow, so not just a simple good job for her work during the plague.
Not quite. There were definitely ulterior motives at play. Makes you wonder about Naidu's perspective, too, accepting the award.
Was it a strategic move on her part? Or did it cause friction within her circles? A topic for another deep dive, maybe?
There are definitely layers to unpack there, but moving on, we can't ignore her huge role in the Indian National Congress.
Becoming its first female president in 1925? That's a landmark achievement.
Absolutely monumental, especially considering the social context of the time.
It's almost hard to grasp how massive that was back then. The societal barriers, forget even the political ones, she must have overcome.
It's a testament to her sheer determination and the respect she commanded to rise within a political landscape that was entirely dominated by men.
This wasn't just symbolic, though. She was actively shaping the Congress's direction.
Right. And her close collaboration with Mahatma Gandhi shouldn't be overlooked.
Together, they were at the forefront of so many movements. Non-cooperation, Salt Satyagraha, even the Quit India movement. She even spent 21 months in prison for her activism.
A testament to her unwavering commitment to the cause of India's freedom.
That's true dedication. But there's another dimension to her activism that we often don't talk about as much.
You're talking about her dedication to women's empowerment.
Yes. It's like a parallel thread throughout her entire journey. Fighting for India's independence, but simultaneously working to liberate women from the social constraints of the time.
A powerful combination. It's like she understood that true freedom had to encompass both the political and the social spheres.
So let's dive into that. She was a leading figure in the All India Women's Conference, tirelessly advocating for the betterment of women in Indian society. But what did that look like in practice? What specific issues were they tackling?
The challenges were huge. Limited access to education for women, healthcare, employment. They lacked basic rights in many areas.
So a lot of ground to cover for the All India Women's Conference.
They fought for legal reforms, pushed for social change, trying to empower women through education and awareness, not just improving lives, but changing the very fabric of society.
And Naidu was right in the thick of it, pushing for these changes. At the same time, she's navigating the male-dominated world of Indian politics.
It shows a unique kind of tenacity, doesn't it?
It does. She saw the fight for women's rights and India's freedom as deeply interconnected. You couldn't have one without the other, in her view.
And this fight wasn't confined to India's borders either. She took it global.
That's where things get really fascinating. She used her powerful speaking skills, her diplomatic abilities, to champion India's cause on an international stage.
Her voice reached far beyond India. She challenged the global perception of a colonized nation and demanded recognition for India's struggle for independence.
A bold move, especially for a woman at that time.
Absolutely. For example, think about her participation in the second session of the Round Table Conference in London in 1931.
Representing a colonized nation, advocating for Indian-British cooperation. What a complex and challenging situation.
Especially during such a turbulent time in global politics, we're starting to see a much more complete picture of Sarojini Naidu emerge now.
Not just the poet, But the freedom fighter, the advocate for women, and the international diplomat. Quite the combination, right?
And we've only just scratched the surface. There's so much more to uncover about her legacy and the impact she had on shaping modern India.
I'm already eager to dive deeper. But for now, let's give our listeners a moment to absorb all this.
Yes, definitely. A lot to take in.
What stands out to you about Sarojini Naidu's early life and activism? How do you think those experiences shaped her worldview and her commitment to social change? We'll be back soon to delve deeper into her later years and the lasting legacy she left behind.
Looking forward to it.
Welcome back. I hope you've had a moment to really think about Sarojini Naidu's early life, her leap into activism, and that Kaiser Hind thing. It really adds a layer of complexity, doesn't it?
It really does. Shows how much was going on beneath the surface. But let's shift gears a bit now. Fast forward to India gaining independence.
What a moment. How do you think someone like Naidu, who dedicated her life to this cause, felt during those early years of independence?
I imagine it must have been such a mix of emotions. Elation, relief, definitely.
Yeah, but also this huge sense of responsibility, right?
Exactly. The fight for freedom was won, but the real work was just beginning. Building a nation. And Naidu was not about to sit back and just watch.
Oh no, she was never one to be passive.
She took on a role that really solidified her place in history, becoming the first female governor of an Indian state, Uttar Pradesh.
Wow. Even by today's standards, that's a massive leap forward. Shows how India's political scene was changing, at least in terms of recognizing women's leadership.
It's tempting to see it as a clear victory for women's rights. But like most things, it's more nuanced than that.
Always more going on behind the scenes.
Think about the challenges she must have faced, the expectations, the scrutiny, all while navigating a system still very much dominated by men.
She was constantly breaking new ground, pushing boundaries, not just for herself, but for future generations of women.
It's hard to overstate her impact in that sense. Her journey, from a vocal advocate in the movement to holding such a high office, it became a beacon of hope for women across India.
Showed them that participation in politics wasn't just a dream, it could be a reality.
And it wasn't just her political actions that made a difference. Remember, she was also this incredibly gifted poet, known as the Nightingale of India.
Right. Those two sides, the political and the artistic, they were so intertwined for her.
Her poetry wasn't just some separate artistic pursuit. It was connected to her activism, her worldview, giving a voice to the voiceless, capturing that yearning for freedom, exploring social justice, themes that were so personal to her.
So we've got this powerful blend of political action and art, both working towards a common goal. But for listeners who might not be familiar with her work, what are some of her key poems that really capture the essence of Sarojini Naidu?
In the Bazaars of Hyderabad is one that immediately comes to mind.
I've heard of that one. What makes it special?
It's so vivid, so sensory. It transports you right to the heart of India. The bustling markets, the colors, the cultural richness.
I can almost picture it.
And beyond the imagery, there's a deeper layer there. It reflects her connection to her homeland, her empathy for the marginalized, her belief in the human spirit.
So it wasn't just about pretty words. It was about conveying a message, sparking something in the reader.
Exactly. And this is where her legacy gets even more interesting. Think about how she managed to weave together these seemingly separate things: political activism, artistic expression, and advocating for social change.
It's like she created this unique tapestry, and it's still relevant today. But how did all this translate into tangible impacts? What were some of the lasting consequences of her work, especially when it comes to women's rights?
It's important to remember that real social change is a slow process.
Yeah, it's not like flipping a switch.
Right, so it's not like Naidu single-handedly changed everything for women in India, but she was a vital part of moving things forward.
How do we measure that impact then?
Sometimes it's not about the immediate results. It's about the seeds you plant for future generations. And in that sense, her impact is huge. She inspired countless women to break free from traditional roles, to pursue education, to speak up, to demand their rights.
So her legacy lives on in all the women who followed in her footsteps.
Absolutely. Breaking barriers and challenging norms across all these different fields. And don't forget the power of her words. Her poetry still resonates with readers today, doesn't it?
It does. It sparks conversations about social justice, identity, things that are still so relevant. It's incredible how she managed to be so timeless.
It speaks to the universality of her themes, her ability to tap into something deeper than just the events of her time.
We've covered so much ground in this deep dive, from her early activism, her involvement in the Indian national movement, to being a governor, a celebrated poet. Sarojini Naidu was a testament to unwavering spirit, wasn't she?
She really was. Her life wasn't just about individual achievements. It reflects India's own journey towards independence and the ongoing struggle for equality and justice.
And it reminds us that each of us can create change just like she did.
Exactly. We don't have to choose between art and activism, between being political and being expressive. We can weave those things together, create something impactful, but that's a conversation for another time. For now, let's pause and reflect.
Welcome back, everyone, to our final segment on this incredible woman, Sarojini Naidu. It's been a fascinating deep dive, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. From those fiery early days in the fight for independence, all the way to her governorship, and of course that captivating poetry.
She really defied expectations every step of the way. What's striking to me is that even after covering so much, it feels like we've only scratched the surface.
I agree. Her influence is so deeply embedded in the story of modern India. It's more than just specific achievements.
It's like she set things in motion that are still unfolding today. But how do you even measure that kind of lasting impact, especially when we talk about social change?
Well, let's go back to that work she did with the All India Women's Conference. It wasn't just about pushing for certain laws or policies.
But bigger than that, wasn't it?
Much bigger.
Yeah.
It was about carving out a space where women's voices could be heard, their issues finally acknowledged. That alone was revolutionary back then.
So it was about shifting that narrative, those deep-rooted societal norms that kept women confined to very specific roles. Did she face pushback for that? It couldn't have been easy advocating for such radical change.
Oh, there was definitely pushback, lots of it. She was criticized, even ridiculed for being so outspoken. Some called her too westernized, others saw her as a threat to the established order. But she never wavered.
She had such incredible strength and conviction.
She understood that real change doesn't happen by playing it safe. You have to push boundaries, make people uncomfortable.
That takes guts, especially in a society as patriarchal as India was back then. But did those efforts actually lead to tangible results? I mean, we could see the progress made in women's rights today, but is there a direct link back to Naidu's work?
It's not always a straightforward, clear line. But there are definitely connections. Think of it like planting seeds.
Okay, I like that analogy.
She planted these seeds of change, nurtured them, and inspired countless others to do the same. Maybe the fruits of that labor weren't immediately visible, but they've definitely shaped the landscape we see today.
It's like a ripple effect. One action creates these waves that keep spreading outward, influencing generations to come.
Exactly. And it goes beyond politics and activism, too. Remember how she used words, her poetry, to evoke emotions, to paint those vivid pictures of India?
It's true, her words had this undeniable power.
It wasn't just beautiful writing, it was a call to action, a reflection of her deep empathy for the human condition. And that's why her legacy remains so strong.
It goes beyond any single accomplishment. It's about that unbreakable spirit, that commitment to a better world, whether through political action, art, or just speaking up for what you believe in.
It's inspiring, isn't it?
Definitely. So what can our listeners, especially those prepping for those UPSC exams or anyone fascinated by history, take away from all this?
I think Sarojini Naidu's life teaches us that history isn't just a bunch of dates and names to memorize. It's about understanding the forces that shape our world. The people who dared to question the status quo, the power of the human spirit to overcome obstacles.
It's about seeing those connections, understanding how one action leads to another, and how those ripples from the past are still shaping our present.
And it's about finding inspiration in the people who came before us, learning from their struggles and their triumphs, and using that knowledge to navigate our own paths.
That's such a powerful reminder. So much to learn from her life and work. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the extraordinary life of Sarojini Naidu.
It was my pleasure.
We hope this sparked your curiosity and inspired you to explore the amazing tapestry of Indian history. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more insightful conversations about fascinating historical figures. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, keep diving deep.